Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for being here. I am joined here today by the U.S. Attorney here in the Middle District of Florida, Lee Bently. I'm also joined by FBI Special Agent in Charge, Paul Wiesapal, FBI Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Ron Hopper, ATF Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Trevor Vellenor. I'm also honored to be joined by Orlando Chief of Police, John Mina, and Orange County Sheriff Jerry Demings. I thank them all for being here with me as well. I am here in Orlando today to meet with our investigators and the state and local partners here on the ground, and to support the people of this great city and all of those who've been affected by this devastating tragedy. But I'm also here to reaffirm this administration's unshakable commitment to the safety of our citizens, to the security of our nation, and to the strength of our values. Now, earlier today, I met with U.S. Attorney Lee Bently and his staff, who were helping to coordinate the Justice Department's participation in this ongoing investigation, which includes my colleagues at the FBI, ATF, the National Security Division, and the U.S. Attorney's offices here in Florida. I've also visited with some of the family members of those who've been lost and wounded in this attack. And this afternoon, I will also meet with state and local law enforcement and first responders. And I could not be more proud of all of the members of the Orlando community that I have met with and who are gathering to meet me here today. And I've made clear that the Department of Justice stands with them. Now, we are doing that in a number of ways. First, we are providing assistance to the first responders and law enforcement officers as they aid in the investigation of this heinous crime. In addition, the Department of Justice is making available $1 million in emergency funding available to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. The state will be able to apply for these funds on behalf of Orlando and other affected jurisdictions to cover, for example, overtime costs for state and local responders. And we will move quickly to make this award as soon as possible. We are also offering emergency counseling resources to first responders to help them deal with the trauma that they, too, have experienced. Because in their bravery, they shoulder the dangers that are visited upon all of us, and they carry that weight long after the smoke has cleared. And we will continue to make any and all resources available to them as this investigation unfolds. But the Department of Justice is also determined to do anything that we can to help this community heal, to recover, and to become whole again. Our Office for Victims of Crime and the FBI Office for Victim Assistance have already worked with local, state, and federal officials and community groups to set up a family assistance center a family assistance center. And in this center, service providers are on the ground, providing crisis counseling and other critical support. And we are also making federal emergency funds and victim compensation funding available to cover, for example, family travel expenses, medical, mental health expenses, and other costs related to this tragedy. We also have experts in crisis response on the scene to help with both short and long-term planning to meet the needs of victims and the community. Now, there is no doubt that this was a shattering attack on our nation, on our people, and on our most fundamental ideals. But the message of Orlando goes far beyond one night of unspeakable terror. The message of Orlando that I have seen today, and what the American people have seen in the wake of this horrific assault, is a message of determination to remove hatred and intolerance from our midst, to live our lives freely and without fear, and to stay true to the principles of liberty, justice, and equality that define America at our best. And I'm deeply proud of the way that the federal, state, and local law enforcement officers and first responders here have gone above and beyond the call of duty. And I am so inspired by the strength and the resilience of the survivors and their loved ones. And I am deeply moved by the way that this community and our national community has stood together in support of one another, in defiance of terror, and in defense of our most cherished ideals. And let us be clear, those ideals include the understanding that our diversity makes us stronger, and that no matter who we are, what we look like, where we are from, or whom we love, this extraordinary nation belongs to us all. Now, I know that the LGBT community, in particular, has been shaken by this attack. It is indeed a cruel irony that a community that is defined almost exclusively by whom they love is so often a target of hate. And let me say to our LGBT friends and family, particularly to anyone who might view this tragedy as an indication that their identities, that their essential selves might somehow be better left unexpressed or in the shadows, this Department of Justice and your country stands with you in the light. We stand with you to say that the good in this world far outweighs the evil, that our common humanity transcends our differences, and that our most effective response to terror and to hatred is compassion, it's unity, and it's love. We stand with you today as we grieve together, and long after the cameras are gone, we will continue to stand with you as we grow together in commitment, in solidarity, and in equality. And once again, I want to thank all my colleagues for their outstanding work over this past week. And I want to express my gratitude for all that they and our partners on the ground have done here and will continue to do to move our efforts forward. And I want to pledge the ongoing support of the Department of Justice and the entire Obama administration as we work to ensure the safety and the security of all Americans. Thank you all, and at this point in time, I'm happy to take a few questions. Let me start with here, and then I'll go to this lady in the front. So, gentlemen, and then...
Attorney General, FBI Director Comey said last week that the FBI had twice investigated the gunman for possible extremist ties to get close to files. Did the FBI miss crucial warnings on this?
Well, we're looking at all of that. As you note, this individual, Mateen, came under investigation a few years ago himself because of his own actions and his own statements. He was investigated. We looked to see whether or not he was going to act to carry out some of the statements he was making. Didn't find evidence at that time, and it was closed. He came under the radar again in the context of another investigation because someone that he knew had traveled overseas to become a suicide bomber, and he was interviewed then but was not directly involved in that matter. We are going back and looking at all of our contacts with him as we are asking people to look back at their contacts with him as well to determine what, if anything, we could have done better. So it's too early to say right now. We're looking at all of that. This lady here.
Tell us if his family is cooperating with investigators, and also do you have any kind of timeline? I know it's been said days, maybe years, but do you have any better timeline of when a decision might be made about charging or not charging at least possible family members?
Well, what I can say is that this investigation is active, it is open, it is ongoing, and we are seeking to talk to, as I mentioned before, anyone who knew Mateen and might be able to shed light on his motivations, on his actions, on anything else about him. So at this point, we're not discussing other individuals, except to say that we're seeking to gather as much information from everyone as we can. So at this point, we're not going down to provide that information at this time. And then I'm going to go to the gentleman in the back and then the lady in front. Yes. Yeah, no, you, sir.
Are you open to releasing the 911 call recordings? A lot of the families have said that's crucial to them. The governor has indicated he would like to see that as well. Are you open to doing that?
We are. As you know, we've released a transcript of one of the 911 calls and summaries of some of the other calls. When we have a situation like this, as we did in San Bernardino, where the killer is deceased, we are able to provide more information than we are often able to do when the matter is being handled in court as part of a court investigation, where, again, we are limited by the rules of evidence and what will be in court. So we are looking to be as transparent as possible and to provide as much information as possible. Over the course of time, we certainly are open to that. I can't tell you when or in what context, but I can tell you that we are open to that. And the lady in front of you.
So, given the obvious red flags with the team, does the Bureau deserve blame for missing something?
As I've said, we're going to go back and look at all of our contact with him and to see if there's anything that we either missed or could or should have done differently. As we've indicated, the first investigation involved him and his own statements, and the issue is always, is an individual going to act on any statements that might indicate violence? And so a full investigation was done there. The other investigation was of his contacts with someone else, did not involve his own actions, did not indicate that he was headed towards a violent act at that time. But we are going to go back and look at all of that. And I'm going to come to this lady and then right behind you.
How many shots were fired by Mr. Mateen?
Just couldn't hear you.
And
So at this point, we are still reconstructing all of that. As you can imagine, the ballistics experts are going through the club and have gathered a great deal of evidence. We are looking to get the answers to those questions. Because this is still under review, I don't have that information for you. And right behind you, yes, miss.
The DOJ has pledged their ongoing support. You said $1 million available in funds, but the Obama administration did deny the state of emergency for Florida. Why was that?
I think you're referring to something for the Orlando area, not the state. Yes. Yes. My understanding is that that involved the Department of Homeland Security's assessment of another type of funding. I'm not able to comment on that, but I do think that we have provided a great deal of assistance over the years. I believe just last year there, in fact, was a simulated exercise of an incident just like this that people in Florida, law enforcement in Florida, carried out in conjunction with federal authorities that went a great way towards improving information and the like. I'm going to go right behind you to this gentleman over here and then to this gentleman here. So, sir.
Are you convinced that Omar Mateen's wife did not know about this attack, or should she have done more to stop it?
Well, we're not going to speak about anyone else's role in this right now while we're investigating the matter, because we're not going to be able to provide that conclusion at this point in time. As I said, we are trying to learn everything we can about Mateen and all the people in his ambit in the days and weeks and months leading up to this attack. And so we're looking into everything. And there's a gentleman here.
Mateen went to a gun store before the attack and they asked for 1,000 bullets. What the investigation looks like the owner of the gun shop called the FBI. Has been done anything about this?
Well, as you've seen, there have been reports about that, and in fact, actually it was in connection with another investigation. The gun shop owner was interviewed about another matter, and during the course of talking to federal agents, he mentioned that an individual had come into his shop that he deemed to be somewhat suspicious. It was Mr. Mateen, although, because he didn't make a purchase, he didn't buy anything, he didn't leave any ID, there was no way to determine who that individual was. And it was only after the tragic events of last weekend that the gun shop owner realized who that individual was and, of course, provided that information as well. And that is that, and we commend him for that and we thank him for that. Again, we're gathering all the information we can. Mateen did not make his purchase of the weapons at that gun shop. He went to a different gun shop and made purchases that he used that night. And let me go to, I mean, you've already asked a question. I'm going to go to the lady right next to you and then this gentleman in the blue shirt. Yes, ma'am.
As you've been asking people if you see something, say something, have you gotten any new information about his activities in the weeks leading up to the public?
We're gathering all information. I'm not going to be able to give you a full readout on that because we're still processing everything. Sir.
A long list of federal services that are being provided in Orlando right now. A lot of those were brought up last week and initiated last week. Anything particularly new today?
Well, we are hoping to process the application to get the law enforcement funds out as quickly as possible. That would be $1 million that would help the Florida Department of Law Enforcement deal directly with Orlando's needs and other jurisdictions' needs to cover the overtime costs, to cover the issues here. We are continuing the emergency counseling for both the victims and for the first responders, and those will be ongoing.
As a follow-up, the gentleman behind you and other staffs, have they brought any additional needs to your attention?
Well, at this point in time, you know, again, we're taking all information in. I believe that everyone is involved in trying to process the resources that we have sent out, but if additional needs are identified, we will work to provide them. I'm going to go to this young lady, and then there's a gentleman here. So, Miss? Yes.
Wondering if you can clarify some reports out there about the timeline what the governor was doing before the attack. He went to the club for a hearing 2 hours before the attack, got a wristband, booked in security, and then came back. Is that accurate? Also, what can you tell us about any tickets he may have purchased, plane tickets for his family to go to San Francisco after the attack?
Okay. I'm not going to be able to comment on those right now because, again, we're still putting all that together as a timeline. We do hope to be able to provide as much information as possible. I'm not able to give you that answer right now.
What about this video? There's existence of a video of him using the rifle that he used in the attack at a gun range. Can you confirm the existence of that video and investigators are looking at it?
At a gun range?
There's video apparently of him using the assault rifle and practicing with it.
Again, I'll have to ask the local investigators to confirm that with you. There is a lot of video out there, and we are trying to, again, provide as much information as we can. So I'll ask one of the local investigators to confirm or let you know about that one. And this gentleman in the back, sir.
The phone calls that he made, 16, I believe, in the last few moments, he apparently made a goodbye call to somebody. Will we ever know who all those callers were, and have they all been interviewed?
Well, we're working to identify anyone he had contact with that night, up to obviously including any phone contact, any kind of electronic communication that he had, and we're still processing all that information as well. I'm going to go to this gentleman here. Yes. And then I'll go to this gentleman on the, then on you.
Has your investigation found out if he's been to other gay clubs in the Orlando area, and could you comment on his interest in joining the law enforcement academy in Florida several times?
Well, you know, he had a job as a security guard, and I believe he had expressed an interest in joining law enforcement. We're still tracking all that down. And with respect to his interest or involvement or attendance at gay clubs, that's been reported. Again, we are following every lead. I'm not able to give you a conclusive answer at this time. I'm going to go to this gentleman here.
Thank you.
And then back.
Omar Martin have HIV in the autopsy exam.
I'm sorry.
Omar Martin have HIV in the autopsy.
I don't have that information for you. I'm sorry. Ultimately, we are trying to obtain the autopsy reports for everyone who lost their life. The victims will probably come first, and then ultimately his. And depending upon the information there, we will see if we can release those. I don't know the answer to that at this point. There was a lady in the back. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Are you confident that you'll ever be able to fully understand the motivation for this?
You know, whenever you look at someone's motivation or intent, whether they're living or whether they're dead, you look at their actions and their activities surrounding the event. You look at what they said, you look at what they did, you look at how they behaved, and you come up with the most reasonable interpretation, the one that fits the facts there. And so we do feel that as we continue to build a timeline and a chronology and to build his life, that we will be able to determine this. I cannot tell you definitively that we will ever narrow it down to one motivation. People often act out of more than one motivation. This was clearly an act of terror and an act of hate. So we will look at all motivations and hope to come to a conclusion there. I'm going to go to someone who has not asked a question, then I'll come back to you and this lady. So, sir?
Is a grand jury being used in this case, and if so, why go down that route?
I'm not going to comment on whether a grand jury is being used. We don't comment on the investigative techniques, but we are looking at everything. I can tell you that.
Has his wife left the state of Florida?
I'm sorry.
Has the shooter's wife left the state of Florida?
Right now, I do not know exactly the answer to that. I believe she was going to travel, but I do not know exactly her location now. So there's a young lady here who has not asked a question. There's a gentleman in the back who has not asked a question. So this young lady.
Were any victims, including people still in the hospital, shot and killed by police?
You know, we don't know right now the trajectory of all the bullets that were used in the club. We are still involved in reconstructing where all the bullets traveled and also how all of the victims died. We will find that information out. It will be part of the information that will be made available to you. We don't have the answer just because we have not finished that assessment. And there's a gentleman all the way in the back who hasn't asked.
We've heard a lot of talk about homegrown and domestic-run terrorism. Going forward, how is the Justice Department going to help protect the citizens of this country from something that isn't this foreign-sounding threat from across the ocean, but is right here in our neighborhoods, in our towns?
Mm-hmm. You know, we have spoken about our concerns about homegrown extremists for some time now. With all sorts of motivations and all sorts of reasons for what they do. And while it's a challenge, it is one that we will continue to investigate and continue to try and prevent. We try and identify individuals who are expressing certain views that might lead them to violence and try and determine When and are they looking to act on that? We also are asking people who know individuals to alert us to concerns that they may have. In many of the cases that we do investigate of homegrown extremists, we find when we look back over the entire investigation that at some point someone was aware of a change or had a concern and noticed something out of the ordinary. So we rely on the public and family members to a great extent. We also have to think about how do we deal with the fact that because we do have a free and open society, and we have to have that violent jihadist ideology is easily consumed by individuals who are led down a path to take certain actions. And how do we break that chain? How do we interject some sort of point there that leads them into a different path? How do we connect with those individuals? And we're looking at all of those things.
Okay, thank you so much.
So I'm sorry for those who didn't, I think we covered, I've tried to get everyone who didn't get to ask a question, so I'm sorry for those of you who didn't.
Support the no-fly, no-buy concept. They're working on fine-tuning it right now on Capitol Hill and maybe introduce tomorrow.
We've expressed the department's support, in particular for the Feinstein Amendment that would give the department two very important tools: the ability to stop the sale of a gun to someone on the no-fly list, as well as the ability, should a person challenge that, because they would have that right as well, to litigate that matter in a way that protects our sensitive, secure, and classified information. So those are the two concerns that we have always had with that, and we're grateful that Congress is looking at addressing those concerns and trying to close this particular loophole for terrorists. Thank you.